Mr. Speaker, the $450,000, that's more than some of the 9/11 victims received. It's more than the next of kin receives in insurance of those 13 Gold Star families that got killed by a suicide bomber who was in the prison of Bagram. Mr. Speaker, I watched in disbelief as President Biden said he'd do nothing different. I watched in disbelief, Mr. Speaker, when he had a press conference and he told Americans it was safe to come to the airport. In less than 30 minutes, you were on that conference call too, Mr. Speaker, where the Secretary of State, Joint Chiefs, said no, it wasn't safe to come to the airport. Mr. Speaker, there are many people that have served this nation, served in the armed services, and on both sides of this aisle. I have never watched members work so hard to get the American hostages out of Afghanistan to only be shut down by our own State Department. Mr. Speaker, I want to tell you of a personal story. Mr. Speaker, I picked up the phone one morning when this first started, and I called the regular number to the White House. And I said, I'd like to talk to the President about what's happening in Afghanistan. White House recently called, wanted to know if it was really me. To the President's credit, he called me back. I said, Mr. President, I know you're trying to hold this deadline for the Taliban, but what about our allies? What about those from the UK and France who fought side by side, not because their country was attacked, but because we were attacked? He told me he wasn't going to budge. I said, Mr. President, there are thousands of Americans that are held there that can't get out. He said, Kevin, no, the number is much smaller. I said, Mr. President, what is the number then? Oh, it's just smaller. I've watched the President look America in the eye and tell us he would not leave till every American's out. What do you say to those Americans that are still stuck there? The last time we felt like this, Jimmy Carter was president. Mr. Speaker, what does it say to those Gold Star families? Mr. Speaker, I had one in my office, a father who had his daughter, who wasn't even supposed to be there but volunteered. She was an electrician. Just days before, you see photos of her holding a young child. She told her sister, I'm going out in front of the wall because you can't believe it. Someone needs to be there for them. She wasn't supposed to be out in front of that wall. When that suicide bomber that was locked up in Bagram, that never should have got out, that we never should have shut down, killed 13 of the finest Americans we know. You know what this bill does? Nothing for them. It gives more money to an illegal person who crossed this border. Americans expect more. Our priorities should be different. These people risk their life every day for us. Just let that sink in to your children's children. One-party rule for 1 year has brought us inflation we haven't seen in 31 years. Gas prices the highest it's been since the last time President Biden was down at the White House. A Thanksgiving that's going to cost you more at any time in your life. A border where 1.7 million encounters. A border between February and October that more people have crossed than 2018, 2019, and 2020 combined. And Mr. Speaker, the closest the president has ever been to the border in 42 years is to drive through El Paso. Mr. Speaker, a vice president who is the czar of the border. This isn't a Republican or Democrat issue. This is the safety of this nation. What do you think's going to happen to that border when you provide $1 billion in amnesty? What do you think's going to happen when you reward people with $450,000? Where do you get the money? From the hardworking taxpayers of America who have less to give. But you know what? They're going to have to give more because you're hiring 87,000 IRS agents to come after them. 1.2 million more audits. And half of all those 1.2 are going after Americans who make $75,000 or less. That's what you base this entire bill on. That's what you waited for the CBO to tell you. How much money can we get from them? How is that possible? The payments for illegal immigrants is just the latest data point in a much larger trend of failures on this border. Cheered on by left-wing activists, President Biden and Vice President Harris have presided over the greatest series of border security blunders in American history. Mr. Speaker, if 160 different countries have had people come across that border illegally,